An ugly girl marries a billionaire for plastic surgery, unaware he'd loved her for years. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from today? Please drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to the main character. Claire Monroe had learned to recognize rejection before it was spoken. It always arrived the same way. A pause that lasted half a second too long. A smile that did not reach the eyes. A decision made before she finished her sentence. On this morning, Claire sat across from a hiring manager in a bright modern office in downtown Los Angeles. The walls were white, the desk was clean, everything felt orderly and controlled. She wore her best outfit, a simple blouse and a jacket she had pressed carefully the night before. The woman interviewing her glanced at Claire's resume, then looked up. Her eyes flicked briefly to Claire's face, then away again. "You have the qualifications," the woman said politely. "But this position is very client-facing. Presentation is extremely important to us." Claire nodded. She always nodded. "We will be in touch," the woman added, already standing. Outside the office, Claire paused near the elevator, waiting for the doors to close. As they did, she heard voices behind her. "Not meant for her. Never meant for her. She's not..." The words landed harder than any insult spoken aloud. On the sidewalk, the city moved around her without slowing down. A group of coworkers laughed as they passed. A couple stepped aside, barely hiding their discomfort. A child stared too long before being pulled away. Claire caught her reflection in a store window. The glass warped her face slightly, stretching what people already seemed eager to judge. She looked away, her chest tight, and kept walking. The bus ride home was quiet. No one sat beside her, though there were empty seats. She did not blame them. She had stopped doing that years ago. At home, the apartment smelled faintly of medicine and old furniture. Her mother sat at the small kitchen table sorting mail with shaking hands. Hospital bills. Collection notices. A past due stamp in red ink. "I did not get the job," Claire said softly. Her mother nodded without looking up. There was no disappointment left to express, only exhaustion. That night, Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle. She thought about how many times she had been told to be confident, to smile more, to work harder, as if effort could change the way strangers decided her worth in the first few seconds. Claire did not want to be beautiful. She wanted to be invisible to judgment. The next morning she tried again. Another interview. Another polite rejection. Another careful explanation that sounded like concern but felt like dismissal. By evening, she walked home on foot, letting the noise of the city blur into something distant. People stepped around her. No one saw her. When she reached her apartment building, she paused at the entrance, her reflection staring back at her from the glass door. For a moment, she imagined what it would feel like to walk into a room and not be assessed before speaking. She turned the key and went inside. What Claire did not know was that this was the last day her life would feel small. She did not know that someone had already noticed her years ago when no one else had looked twice. And she did not know that very soon the world would offer her a choice that did not feel like a choice at all. But for now, Claire Monroe sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills and unanswered questions, believing the world had already decided what she was worth. She was wrong. When Claire Monroe woke up the next morning, the ceiling above her looked the same as it always had. A small crack near the corner. A faint water stain from an old leak the landlord never fixed. Nothing about her life had changed overnight, even though something inside her already felt heavier. She moved quietly so she would not wake her mother. The apartment was small, barely 600 square feet, and every sound carried. Claire poured herself a cup of coffee black because milk had become something they rationed without saying it out loud. On the kitchen counter sat a stack of envelopes. She did not need to open them to know what they were. Hospital bills. Insurance statements. Payment reminders that used words like urgent and final notice. Her mother emerged from the bedroom, slowly leaning on the wall for balance. The illness had been dragging on for years, now one appointment after another, each one costing more than the last. "You should rest today," Claire said gently. Her mother smiled, the kind of smile that tried to protect instead of reassure. "You have interviews, do not you?" Claire nodded, even though she knew how the day would end. She always nodded. By noon, she had already been turned away twice. One place cited company culture. Another mentioned brand image. The words changed, but the meaning stayed the same. On a park bench during her lunch break, Claire watched people pass by with coffee cups that cost more than her hourly wage. She thought about how many times she had been told to work harder, to improve herself, to be patient, as if patience could pay medical debt. Claire did not want luxury. She did not dream about mansions or designer clothes. She wanted to walk into a room and not feel her chest tighten. She wanted to apply for a job and be judged for her skills before her face. She wanted her mother to sleep without pain and without fear of the next bill. That afternoon, she sat across from a loan officer who barely concealed his discomfort. He glanced at the paperwork, then at her, then back at the screen. "I am sorry," he said, already typing. "Without collateral, there is nothing we can do." Outside the bank, Claire stood still for a long moment. Cars rushed past. A bus splashed water onto the curb. No one noticed her. On the walk home, she passed a large digital billboard advertising cosmetic surgery. Perfect faces rotated across the screen. Words like transformation and rebirth glowed against the sky. Claire stopped without meaning to. For a brief second, she imagined what it would be like to wake up and not brace herself before looking in the mirror. To exist without apology. The thought scared her. That night, she sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand as she slept. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Claire counted her mother's breaths, slow and uneven. She thought about the future. About what would happen if nothing changed. There were only two paths she could see. One was familiar, safe in the worst way. A lifetime of being overlooked. Jobs that never came. A slow drowning under debt and quiet humiliation. The other was unknown. Terrifying. It required her to give up something she did not even know how to name yet. Pride. Privacy. Control. Claire pressed her lips together, forcing the thought away. She did not know it then, but the question had already been asked inside her. How much was she willing to trade just to be treated like a person? When her phone buzzed late that night with a message from an unknown number, Claire stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. The words were brief, polite, precise. A request for a meeting, a chance, it said, to discuss an opportunity. Claire did not reply right away. She looked around the apartment, at the peeling paint, at the unpaid bills, at her mother sleeping restlessly in the next room. Then she typed back a single word. Yes. She had no idea that this decision was already pulling her toward a contract that would change her life, or that survival for her was about to be mistaken for ambition. And she did not yet understand that the most dangerous choices are the ones that feel necessary. The building where the meeting was scheduled did not have a sign outside. No logo, no name, just glass, steel, and silence. Claire Monroe arrived 10 minutes early, her hands folded tightly in her lap as she sat in the lobby. Everything around her felt expensive in a way she was not used to. The floor was polished stone, the chairs were real leather. Even the air smelled clean, filtered, controlled. She wondered not for the first time if she was in the wrong place. A receptionist finally looked up from her screen and smiled politely, though her eyes flicked over Claire in the same quick, practiced way Claire had come to recognize. "Mr. Julian Hale will see you now," she said. The elevator ride was quiet. The numbers climbed higher than Claire expected. When the doors opened, the hallway was empty, leading to a single office at the end. Julian Hale was standing by the window when Claire entered. He did not turn right away. The city stretched behind him, distant and blurred, as if it belonged to another world entirely. When he finally faced her, his expression was calm, unreadable. He looked to be in his late 30s. His suit was dark, perfectly tailored, without a single unnecessary detail. "Miss Monroe," he said evenly. "Thank you for coming." His voice was steady, controlled, without warmth or cruelty. It made Claire uneasy. He gestured for her to sit. She did, perching on the edge of the chair, her back straight, her heart pounding. Julian remained standing for a moment longer, studying her, not the way interviewers usually did. There was no discomfort in his gaze. No judgment. Just focus. I will be direct, he said, taking his seat across from her. I do not believe in wasting time. Claire nodded, bracing herself. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Hale Aesthetics, Julian continued. My company specializes in reconstructive and cosmetic surgery. She had heard the name before, everyone had. His clinics were everywhere. His work was praised as revolutionary, ethical, transformational. Julian slid a folder across the desk toward her. It was thick, heavy. I am proposing a marriage, he said. The word landed in the room like a dropped object. Claire stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. I am sorry, she said. What? A legal marriage, Julian repeated calmly. Temporary. Contractual. Her breath caught. This was not an interview. This was not a job. I do not understand, Claire said. Julian opened the folder, turning it so she could see. There were documents inside. Typed pages. Legal language. Signatures waiting for a name. The marriage would last for a fixed term, he explained. In exchange, my company would fully cover comprehensive reconstructive and cosmetic procedures, post-operative care, rehabilitation, and financial stability during the duration of the contract. Claire felt the room tilt slightly. Why? She asked before she could stop herself. Julian did not answer right away. He folded his hands on the desk, composed. For branding, he said finally. Public relations. A narrative of transformation. A symbol of rebirth. Claire swallowed. You do not know me. I know enough, Julian replied. She laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief. This is insane. Perhaps, he said. But it is also mutually beneficial. She looked down at the folder again. Her hands trembled as she touched the paper. What are the conditions? She asked quietly. Julian's tone did not change. There will be no romantic expectations, no emotional obligations, no interference in each other's private lives. He paused, then added, the marriage will end once the contract term is complete. Claire felt something cold settle in her chest. And if I refuse? She asked. Julian met her eyes. For the first time, something unreadable passed through his expression, gone as quickly as it appeared. Then nothing changes, he said simply. Silence stretched between them. Claire thought of the billboard, of the bills, of her mother's labored breathing in the night, of every door that had closed before she could speak. This marriage benefits both of us, Julian said evenly. That is all it is. She looked at him, then really looked. At the way he held himself, at the careful distance he maintained, at the strange familiarity in his gaze that made no sense at all. It felt impossibly as though he had already decided something long before she walked into this room. I need time, Claire said. Julian nodded once. Of course. As she stood to leave, he added quietly, almost as an afterthought, everything will change, Miss Monroe, just not in the way you think. Claire did not reply. She left the office, carrying the weight of a decision that did not feel like a choice. And for the first time, she realized that the most dangerous offers are not the ones that threaten you. They are the ones that solve all your problems at once. Claire Monroe did not sleep that night. The words from Julian Hale's office replayed over and over in her mind, each time sounding heavier than before. A marriage, a contract, a solution that felt too precise to be accidental. By morning, the city looked unchanged. Cars moved, people hurried past. Life continued as if no impossible offer had been placed in her hands. Claire returned to the building 2 days later. This time, she was not early. She arrived exactly on time, as if punctuality might give her some control over what she was about to lose. The office looked the same. Quiet, controlled, unforgiving in its perfection. Julian was already seated when she entered. He rose politely, gesturing for her to sit. There was no greeting beyond a nod, no attempt to soften the moment. You have read the documents, he said. Yes, Claire replied. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. A second folder lay on the desk, thicker than the first. Tabs marked sections. Legal language ran dense and precise across every page. Julian opened it methodically. The terms are straightforward, he said. This is a legal marriage, registered and public. It exists for a fixed duration. At the end of that term, it will be dissolved without dispute. Claire listened, her hands folded tightly in her lap. There will be no emotional expectations, Julian continued. No declarations. No jealousy. No interference in personal choices. She nodded. You will be provided housing, financial support, and full medical care related to the procedures, he said. In return, you will appear publicly as my spouse during designated events. Claire hesitated. And if I want to leave early? Julian did not flinch. You may. The medical care remains complete. The contract does not bind you beyond consent. The words were careful, clean, almost kind. And privacy? Claire asked. Julian met her eyes. We protect what is agreed upon. Nothing more. Silence settled between them as he slid the pen toward her. Claire looked down at the line where her name would go. This was not romance. This was not rescue. It was an exchange stripped of sentiment. She thought of her mother's quiet breathing in the dark, of the unopened mail, of the doors that had never opened for her. She signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have. When she finished, her signature looked smaller than she remembered it being. Julian signed immediately after. No pause. No hesitation. As he closed the folder, Claire noticed something that unsettled her more than the contract itself. He was watching her the way someone watches a memory. Not with curiosity, not with interest, with recognition. You seem calm, she said before she could stop herself. Julian looked away just briefly. Appearances can be misleading. A faint tension passed through the room, subtle but unmistakable. There is one more thing, he said, standing. From this point forward, the narrative belongs to the public. People will decide what this marriage means. We do not correct them. Claire stood as well. And what does it mean to you? Julian paused. For a fraction of a second, the controlled distance cracked. It means order, he said carefully. And closure. The word lingered between them. As they walked toward the door, Claire became acutely aware of how final the moment felt. Not dramatic, not loud, just irreversible. At the threshold, Julian stopped. You should know, he said quietly, I would not have made this offer lightly. Claire met his gaze. Neither did I accept it. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Approval, perhaps. Or something closer to relief. The elevator doors closed behind her, moments later, sealing the decision in place. Claire Monroe walked out of the building, legally bound to a man she did not know. Bound by rules that promised safety but denied feeling. And bound by a contract that had been signed without emotion, by a man who looked at her as if he had known her far longer than he should have. What neither of them said aloud was the truth both of them felt. This marriage was designed to end. The question was what it would destroy before it did. The first surgery happened less than 3 weeks after the contract was signed. Everything moved quickly after that, as if once the decision had been made, the world refused to slow down for her doubt. Appointments were scheduled without her asking. Specialists introduced themselves with calm confidence. Forms were explained, signed, and filed before Claire Monroe had time to process the weight of each step. Julian Hale was not present on the day of the procedure. He did not wait outside the operating room. He did not offer reassurance. Instead, everything was handled with precision, as if emotion had been carefully removed from the process. The surgery was successful. Then came another, and another. Recovery blurred into a quiet routine of sterile rooms and measured progress. Nurses spoke kindly. Doctors were pleased. Charts showed improvement. Each time Claire looked in the mirror, the changes were undeniable. People began to smile at her. At first, it startled her. The reflexive kindness felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. Doors opened more easily. Conversations lingered longer. Strangers made eye contact. She should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt unsteady. When the public announcement came, it was controlled and immaculate. A carefully worded press release. Professional photographs. Headlines that framed the story as inspiration. From rejection to renewal. A marriage that redefined beauty. Claire sat beside Julian during the first media appearance, her posture perfect, her expression composed. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Julian spoke calmly, confidently. He explained the mission of his company. The importance of access. The belief that everyone deserved a chance to be seen. Claire said very little. She did not need to. Her face told the story they wanted to sell. She became the symbol. Everywhere they went, people whispered. Some admired her courage. Others questioned her motives. A few asked what it was like to be married to a billionaire. No one asked how it felt to wake up, unsure whether the person in the mirror belonged to her. At home, the silence between her and Julian remained intact. They shared a space but not a life. Conversations were brief, polite, carefully contained. Julian never crossed a boundary. Never lingered. Never touched her without necessity. And yet, Claire began to notice things. The way he adjusted schedules when she looked tired. The way he redirected conversations when questions became too invasive. The way his gaze hardened when someone spoke about her past, as if it were a defect that had been corrected. Still, the emptiness grew. One evening, Claire stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. The reflection was elegant, refined. Everything the world had told her she needed to become. She felt nothing. The next morning, her face appeared on a billboard she had passed 100 times before. Larger than life, perfectly lit. She stared at it from the sidewalk, her chest tight. Was this who she was now, or was she simply the proof of someone else's vision? At a charity gala, weeks later, applause followed her entrance. Conversations paused. Eyes turned. Julian offered his arm. She took it because it was expected. As they stood beneath the lights, Claire realized something that chilled her more than the surgery ever had. People did not love her. They loved the story. And the story belonged to Hale Aesthetics. When she looked up at Julian, searching for something familiar, something grounding, his expression was unreadable. Professional. Controlled. But there was tension beneath it, like a rule he was constantly choosing not to break. That night alone, in their shared home, Claire sat on the edge of the bed and tried to remember what she had hoped this would give her. Freedom. Dignity. A life without judgment. Instead, she felt like she had been rebuilt into something valuable to everyone except herself. She had changed. The world had responded. But the quiet inside her had only grown louder. And somewhere beneath the flawless surface of their public success, a question began to form. If this was the transformation everyone celebrated, why did it feel like she had lost more than she had gained? The gala ended late, long after the applause faded and the cameras were packed away. By the time Claire Monroe returned home, the house felt unusually quiet. The lights were dim. The city outside the windows hummed at a distance like something happening in another life. She slipped off her shoes near the door and stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. Her body ached in a way that had nothing to do with the surgeries. It was the exhaustion of being seen all evening without being known. Julian Hale was in the kitchen. He was no longer wearing his suit jacket. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled up slightly as he poured himself a glass of water. The sight startled her. It was the first time she had seen him look almost ordinary. Neither of them spoke at first. Claire moved to the counter and leaned against it, her arms folded loosely across her chest. She did not know how to begin. She only knew that the weight she had been carrying all night had followed her home. "You did not have to step in back there," she said finally. Julian turned to face her. His expression was calm, but something beneath it was tense. "Yes, I did." "That was not part of the agreement," Claire said quietly. "No," he admitted, "it was not." The admission hung between them. Claire looked down at the polished surface of the counter. "Everyone keeps telling me how lucky I am," she said. "How brave. How inspiring." She let out a short breath. "But none of them ask how it feels." Julian watched her carefully, as if every word mattered more than she realized. "How does it feel?" he asked. Claire hesitated. No one had asked her that since the contract began. "It feels like I am living inside someone else's idea of me," she said. "Like the person I was before does not exist anymore. And I am not sure the person I am now belongs to me either." Julian's jaw tightened slightly. He looked away for a moment, then back at her. "You were never invisible," he said. The words were soft, almost restrained, but they landed with unexpected force. Claire frowned. "You did not know me before." Julian did not respond right away. He took a slow breath, as if measuring how much to say. "There are things you do not remember," he said finally. She straightened. What does that mean? Julian leaned back against the counter, keeping a careful distance between them. 5 years ago, he said slowly, there was an incident. In an alley not far from here, Claire felt a flicker of recognition, faint and distant. I do not remember every alley I have walked past, she said. You stopped, Julian replied. When you did not have to, when it would have been easier to keep walking. Her heart beat faster. What are you talking about? You helped someone, he said. Someone who had been hurt. The memory stirred like a shadow. A flash of a narrow street, raised voices, a man on the ground, blood on concrete, her hands shaking as she called for help. I was just doing what anyone should do, she said, unsure why her voice felt unsteady. Julian met her eyes. No, he said quietly. You did what no one else did. Silence filled the space between them again. Claire searched his face, trying to connect the fragments. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know that the world's judgment was never the full story, Julian said. And it never defined you. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. There was restraint there. Control held too tightly. She shook her head slightly. If you knew me before, she said, why pretend? This is only business. Julian's gaze held hers. For a moment, the distance between them felt smaller, charged with words neither of them spoke. Because some truths complicate contracts, he said. Claire swallowed. They stood there close enough to feel the weight of each other's presence, far enough to keep the rules intact. Neither reached out. Neither stepped back. When Julian finally spoke again, his voice was steady but softer than before. You should get some rest. Claire nodded slowly. As she turned toward the hallway, she paused. Julian, she said. He looked at her. For what it is worth, she said, thank you. For tonight. He inclined his head slightly. You are welcome. She walked away with more questions than answers, her thoughts circling the fragments he had revealed. Behind her, Julian remained in the kitchen, staring at nothing in particular, the memory of an alley and a terrified young woman replaying in his mind with painful clarity. The wall between them had not fallen. But for the first time, it had cracked. And neither of them knew what would happen if it broke. The answers did not come gently. They arrived days later, uninvited, wrapped in a truth Claire Monroe was not prepared to carry. It began with a name. During a routine meeting at Hale Aesthetics, Claire overheard 2 senior staff members speaking in low voices outside a conference room. They stopped abruptly when they saw her, offering polite smiles that came too late. That night, curiosity refused to let her sleep. She searched. Old articles, archived interviews, industry features from 5 years ago buried beneath layers of newer success. One headline stopped her breath entirely. Rising innovator survives violent assault, disappears from public view. The photo beneath it showed a man she barely recognized. Julian Hale. His face was swollen, distorted by bruises and damage that no press release had ever mentioned again. The article described an attack late one night, a dispute that turned violent, an injury severe enough that doctors were uncertain whether his face could be fully restored. Claire felt her hands tremble as she scrolled. The dates aligned perfectly. The alley, the blood. Her own shaking hands dialing for help. Memory rushed back with painful clarity. She had been walking home after a late shift. She had heard shouting. Someone else had crossed the street to avoid it. Then another. She had stopped. She remembered kneeling beside a stranger, holding a cloth against his face, while sirens echoed in the distance. She remembered his eyes wide with shock and disbelief, searching hers as if trying to understand why she had not walked away. She had never known his name. Claire closed her laptop slowly. The room felt too quiet. When Julian came home that evening, she was waiting in the living room. The lights were on. The air was heavy with unspoken truth. You knew, she said before he could speak. Julian stopped. For the first time since she had met him, he did not hide behind composure. He did not deny it. Yes, he said. Her chest tightened. How long? From the beginning, he replied. Claire stood. You built everything on this, she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to stay calm. The company. The narrative. The marriage. Julian took a step forward, then stopped himself. I built the company because of what happened, he said. Because I learned what it meant to be judged as broken. As disposable. And me, Claire asked. Where do I fit into that? Julian looked at her, his restraint finally cracking. You saved my life, he said. You stayed when everyone else left. You saw me when I was nothing. Her breath caught. I loved you long before the world decided you were beautiful, he continued. Long before you ever sat in my office. The words landed like a blow. Claire shook her head, backing away. So what was the contract, she demanded? A repayment? A strategy? Pity? No, Julian said immediately. It was the only way I knew how to give you what the world refused to offer. Power. Choice. You took my choice, she said. Silence fell between them, thick and unforgiving. I never meant to trap you, Julian said quietly. I meant to protect you. Claire laughed, once bitter and sharp. You cannot protect someone by deciding their life for them. She turned away, her chest burning with emotions she could not untangle. Gratitude. Anger. Betrayal. Something dangerously close to grief. This was never just business, she said. And it was never just love. It was control. Julian said nothing. There was nothing left to justify. That night, Claire packed a small bag. She did not know where she was going, only that she could not stay. At the door she paused. You did not love me as I was, she said without turning back. You loved what you remembered. Julian watched her leave, the weight of 5 years of silence crushing down on him at last. For the first time, the contract that had brought them together stood exposed for what it truly was. Not a solution, not a romance, but a reckoning neither of them could escape. Claire Monroe did not return for 3 days. She stayed in a small hotel near the edge of the city, a place where no one recognized her face or asked questions. The room was quiet, anonymous. For the first time since the contract was signed, she slept without cameras, schedules, or expectations waiting for her in the morning. But distance did not quiet her thoughts. Anger faded first. Then shock. What remained was a heavy, complicated truth she could not ignore. Julian Hale had not acted out of cruelty. He had acted out of fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of losing her again. That did not make it right. On the 4th day, the headlines changed. Hale Aesthetics announced a press conference. Speculation spread immediately. Some assumed a new campaign. Others predicted a scandal. Claire saw the notification on her phone and felt her chest tighten. She did not plan to attend. But when another message came through, this one directly from Julian, she hesitated. I will not speak for you, the message read. But I need to end this properly. The conference room was full when Claire arrived. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras lined the walls. The air buzzed with anticipation. Julian stood at the podium alone. He looked different. Not polished. Not invincible. There were shadows beneath his eyes, tension in the set of his jaw. When he began to speak, his voice was steady but stripped of its usual confidence. This company was built on the promise of transformation, he said. But transformation without consent is not progress. It is control. A ripple moved through the room. Julian continued. The campaign involving my marriage was approved by me. And today it ends. He reached into a folder and removed a document. Even from her seat at the back of the room, Claire recognized it. The contract. I am dissolving this marriage effective immediately, Julian said. No conditions. No penalties. No expectations. Gasps filled the room. This decision is mine alone, he added. Claire Monroe owes me nothing. She always did. Cameras flashed wildly now. Questions were shouted, overlapping and urgent. Julian raised one hand. There is more. He took a breath, then spoke words that no strategist would have approved. I loved her before the world decided she was unworthy of kindness, he said. Before she was transformed. Before she ever stood beside me. The room fell silent. I am not asking her to stay, Julian continued. I am returning her freedom. Publicly, completely. Claire felt something loosen in her chest. Julian stepped away from the podium, the noise surging back as reporters shouted questions he did not answer. Outside the building, Claire waited. When Julian finally emerged, there were no cameras between them, no audience, just two people standing on opposite sides of a choice that had finally been made honestly. I meant what I said, Julian told her quietly. You choose. Not the contract. Not the life. not the face. Claire looked at him for a long moment. He was not offering solutions. He was not asking for forgiveness. He was letting go. "I needed you to see me," she said. "Not save me." Julian nodded. "I know." They stood there, the city moving around them as it always had. For the first time since this began, Claire felt something she had not expected. Control. Whether she walked away or stayed, the decision would be hers. And that changed everything. Claire Monroe did not make her decision that day. She went home alone. For the first time in months, there were no schedules waiting for her. No public appearances. No handlers. No expectations written into contracts or whispered by strangers. The silence was not empty. It was unfamiliar. In the days that followed, the world reacted loudly. Articles were written, opinions divided. Some praised Julian Hale for his honesty. Others accused him of manipulation. Claire's name appeared everywhere, attached to narratives she had not chosen. She stopped reading them. Instead, she returned to ordinary things. Walking without security, buying groceries without cameras, sitting in cafes where no one looked twice. One afternoon, she stood in front of a mirror in a small clothing store. The reflection was clear, familiar. Changed, yes, but no longer foreign. For the first time, she did not search her face for approval or defect. She simply looked. Claire realized then that the surgery had altered her appearance, but not her worth. That had never been broken. It had only been ignored. A week later, she called Julian. They met in a quiet park near the river, a place where neither of them had ever been photographed together. He arrived without a suit, without the armor of his position, just a man standing with his hands in his pockets waiting. "I am not here to go back to what we were," Claire said when she reached him. Julian nodded. "I would not ask you to." She took a breath. "I am here because I want to choose what comes next. Without debt, without contracts, without gratitude owed." "I understand," he said. She studied him closely, seeing him not as a savior or a strategist, but as a flawed man who had loved imperfectly. "I do not forgive you yet," Claire continued, "but I see you." Julian did not argue. "That is more than I deserve." They walked along the river in silence, not touching, not rushing. When they parted, there was no promise made, no future defined, only honesty. Months passed. Claire found work at a non-profit organization that focused on patient advocacy. She spoke openly about consent, access, and the cost of being judged before being heard. Not as a symbol, as a person. People listened. Julian stepped away from the public spotlight, redirecting his company toward reconstructive work for trauma survivors, offering services without campaigns attached. They met occasionally, sometimes for coffee, sometimes not at all. One evening, Claire stood on her balcony, the city glowing softly beyond the railing. Julian stood a few steps away, leaving space between them that felt intentional, not distant. "I stayed," she said quietly. "Not because you changed my life." He waited. "I stayed because you finally let me own it." Julian looked at her then, not with relief or possession, but with respect. "That is all I ever wanted," he said. Claire smiled. Not for him, for herself. She had not become lovable because she changed. She changed because she had been loved once without conditions. And now she knew how to love herself without needing permission. The world had tried to define her by her face. She chose to define herself by her voice. And this time she was heard.